Well, good afternoon and happy Monday. And if it's Monday, it's Mondays with Michael live here on Facebook. Hoping everyone had a great weekend. The weather seemed to be a little better here in DC, though we did get a lot of rain, but it looks like it's going to be a nice warm week. So mid 50s, low 60s. So hopefully it's getting a little warmer by you, and winter's finally getting its evil head out of here because, we like that spring and summertime. Pitchers and catchers are reporting today at most major league stadiums in the South and in Arizona. So baseball is just around the corner. So spring training is right above us. So let's go Yankees. That said, our session today, we're going to talk about today is conflict. How do we control our emotions during conflict? How does conflict get handled at the workplace? And how do I personally handle conflict? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and I'm going to introduce you to one of the new tools we have in our toolbox. It's the Everything Does Productive Conflict Assessment, released in the fall by Wiley, and a lot of our clients will see a nice little fit in the emotional intelligence work they're doing in getting leaders and managers and even frontline staff in tune to their emotions when it comes to handling conflict. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we start off by telling folks that conflict is inevitable. Conflict is going to happen in the workplace. There's no two ways around it. Conflict is going to happen. And as usual today, I'm going to go through my notes, and I'm also going to go through some of the productive conflict assessment. Here it goes. I'll talk more about this in a little bit, and I can get your hands on one. But conflict is kind of predictable. It's going to happen in the workplace. No way you can get around it. The inevitable part of doing business is conflict. You and I disagreeing on strategy, implementation, decisions, interactions with customers. Conflict's going to happen. It's going to happen in the workplace. Pretty much inevitable. But you control how you behave and how you react to conflict situations. You make a personal choice on that interaction with that other person or persons when you're having conflict. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Understand what conflict behaviors that you demonstrate that are both unacceptable or unproductive, and those behaviors that you can demonstrate that are productive and will help in getting to a resolution of the conflict situation. So how can you take a negative situation and make it into a productive conflict situation? So like always in our programs, participants will take the Everything Disc assessment. So we go through the D, S, and C. We've talked about this before. So there's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. So people get an overview of the profile, but they get an overview of themselves on how they behave in conflict situations. And we talk about some of those productive tendencies and some of those unproductive tendencies. So I'll give you a little bit of highlights of both. So if you're a dominant or D personality style, some of the productive tendencies is you're straightforward, you get to the point, those things are good. But some of the destructive tendencies of the D style are over-dominating, creates win-lose situations. Okay, so those are the kind of things we want to stay away from. Those are the kind of things we talk about in the assessment. Influence, the productive behaviors are open dialogue, verbalization, very, very important, discussing one's feelings, how they are in a situation. But some of the destructive tendencies is that they can become over-emotional, right? They could possibly make personal attacks. That's what happens sometimes with eyes and that destructive behavior. Moving on to S's, so some of the productive behaviors are communicates tactfully. S's tend to be good listeners in conflict situations. They want to make sure they get all sides covered. Some of the destructive tendencies can be problems tend to simmer sometimes with S styles because they don't share what they're feeling. So they tend to simmer, which is something we really don't want to do. And then with the C, the conscientious to productive tendencies is they can get to the roots of the problem. They can get right down to the nitty-gritty. But some of the destructive tendencies, they can become passive-aggressive. And we see that sometimes in C behavior styles when they're working on teams and trying to solve conflict. So we talk about that a little bit. There's a deeper dive into the 4 styles. But then we talk about your automatic thoughts. And this is what we talk about when it comes to some of the destructive responses. What is my first thought? What is my first set of behaviors in a conflict situation? How do I react? How do I behave in that situation? So when we go through this, we have participants actually score part of their workbook and describing what some of those destructive behaviors are. And there's a whole list here, from arguing to caving in to decisiveness to exaggerating the problem to sarcasm to sabotage to overpowering. So we ask participants, when a conflict situation arises, how do you behave? What is the first thought in your mind? What is the first thing you want to do? And we have them think through this. They actually assess this, and then in the assessment, it gives them a deeper dive description of that negative behavior. Why do people do this all the time when the conflict situation arises? And so they have an opportunity to learn about what it is they do and why they do it. It's a nice little piece of the puzzle. But the key here is, how do we change that automatic thought? How do I change that destructive behavior into something that's positive? So in the back end of the assessment, we really work through, how do you change that automatic thought? What are the things you can think about positively before you start having this interaction, this conflict situation in the workplace? So we go through that quite a bit. And then we go through the action planning process, and the participants actually choose a conflict situation either they're going through or just went through, and kind of analyze the situation a little bit. How did they respond when that situation came up? What did they do that was productive, and what did they do that maybe wasn't productive? And how do I change my first thought process to make sure that that doesn't happen again? So the assessment is pretty thorough. It's a good half-day program that we can deliver inside the organization. For clients that have done DISC before, we kind of take the DISC part out of it and bring the productive conflict into it. But it's a good way for participants really to learn how to behave differently, how to control their emotions before they get into a conflict situation. We are offering a free sample of the assessment on our website, but if you really want to take the assessment yourself and see what it does for you, just send me a little note here in the chat box after today, or send me a direct message either through Facebook or my email address, and we'll get you to take a look at this. I really think it'll be a good tool for you to work through some conflict situations either within your team or within your department, and give you a better sense of how you can control your emotions in these conflict situations. So a little heads up for next week. Next week we won't be in the office on Monday. It's President's Day, and a lot of DC, for those who work in the metropolitan area, a lot of DC kind of shuts down during these long weekends. So we will not be in the office next Monday. So Mondays with Michael Live will be next Tuesday, the 20th. We'll be back in the office here at 4 o'clock. And we'll have our session here live. Our session next week, we're doing the whole work of leaders, vision, alignment, execution. So our session next week is for leaders, and we're going to do the alignment piece. We did the vision piece. We talked about vision, how to craft a vision, some of the behaviors around crafting a vision. Now we're going to do alignment. And we have found over the years, we'll talk more about this next week, that the alignment piece of the vision, alignment, execution tends to be the toughest piece for a lot of leaders to achieve. We'll talk about some of the scores and some of the behaviors we've seen in the alignment area. But a lot of leaders we work with try to go from vision to execution, and they tend to stumble. They really don't work a lot on that alignment piece. So we're going to talk about that next week on Tuesday. So we're going to go Mondays with Michael Live on Tuesday here on Facebook. Again, send me your questions along the way. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And before I go, since I have a couple minutes left, or at least a minute left, it's Starbucks time. Salud. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Take care.